Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Have you been enjoying the left's latest wrap-up smears of Supreme Court justices while they prattle on about how concerned they are about threats to our democracy and the degradation of institutions? We can't have people losing faith in our institutions as they politicize the institutions and attempt to character assassinate, or as Justice Alito said over the weekend, maybe literally assassinate Supreme Court justices. You remember the wrap-up smear. Nancy Pelosi explained it to the nation, how it works, what the left does. You remember?
We call it the wrap-up smear. If you want to talk politics, call it the wrap-up smear. You smear somebody with falsehoods and all the rest, and then you merchandise it. And then you write it, and they'll say, see, it's reported in the press that this, and this. So they have that validation that the press reported the smear, and then it's called the wrap-up smear. Now I'm going to merchandise the press's report on the smear that we made. And it's a tactic. And it's
a tactic. No big deal. And a noted smear merchant, Dick Durbin, Sack of Durbin, the senior senator from the land of the lost in the Midwest, he was in the business of merchandising the smear, as Nancy Pelosi explained. He wanted Chief Justice Roberts to appear before a Senate Judiciary Committee this week about the court's current ethical standards because of the smears against Justice Thomas and Justice Alito. And, oh, by the way, really, Roberts and Scalia, even posthumously by the D.C. Press Corps. And in a rather remarkable response, the Supreme Court justices, by the way, Roberts declined the invitation, of course, but more than that, the Supreme Court justice sent a unanimous 9-0 letter that would include the likes of Sotomayor and KBJ and Kagan, sent a unanimous 9-0 letter addressed to the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, that would be Sack of Durbin, slamming them over their ethics complaints about Justice Thomas. This was in response to the Senate trial ballooning a new legislation on ethics to allow Congress to have independent oversight instead of a general code of conduct for justices of the Supreme Court. Yeah. Interesting. 9-0. Bipartisan. I mean, not that the justices consider themselves partisans, but clearly they span the ideological spectrum, and there's a divide there, as we know from the presidents who nominated them. Something else, too, speaking of ethics, Alito made reference to the fact that in this interview that he gave to the Journal that he thinks he knows, has a pretty good idea who the leaker is. Well, if he does, why can't we get to the bottom of that? Anyway, all these are questions for our next guest. Pleased to be joined again by William Jacobson, who's a clinical professor of law and director of the Securities Law Clinic at Cornell Law School. He's also the founder of LegalInsurrection.com and president of the Legal Insurrection Foundation. Professor Jacobson, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on again.
So the attacks in the direction of Justice Thomas and Justice Gorsuch that have sort of no foundation, they certainly wouldn't survive a motion to dismiss. This is an attempt to delegitimize the court. It's an attempt to stage a hostile takeover of the court. How do you view this coordinated effort against the justices who are not nominated by a Democrat president?
Well, it's all of the above. It is an attempt by Democratic senators and activist groups to delegitimize the one institution they don't control and are unlikely to control in the near future because of a 6-3 conservative majority. It's completely bad faith. It is a continuation of the sort of vile attacks that you saw against Justice Kavanaugh during his confirmation hearings, lie after lie, exaggeration after exaggeration. It's bad faith, and people should recognize it for what it is. The Supreme Court is not beholden to the Senate after the justices get confirmed. If they don't like a justice, they cannot confirm that justice. There is an impeachment process for Supreme Court justices. But what the Senate doesn't get to do is nitpick what the Supreme Court does. It has that independence. This is an attempt to intimidate and disrupt and, I believe, force out of office due to harassment of Supreme Court justices by Democrats.
Well,
I just never in my lifetime, or did I think that this would happen, that the media would try and smear Supreme Court justices. What's the end game?
I believe the end game is that the Democrats know that unless they can force one or more of the conservative justices off the court by making their lives so miserable, by harassing their family, by protesting outside their homes, by inciting their lunatic followers to attempt to assassinate a justice, which happened with Kavanaugh. I think the end game here is to free up one or more Supreme Court seats while Joe Biden is still in office before the 2024 election so that they can fill it. I think that's the end game here.
Should we be impressed that the leftist justices on the court collaborated on this letter to reject Dick Durbin's suggestion for new legislation with respect to governing the ethical disclosures of Supreme Court justices? Because, I mean, to some extent, it's in their self-interest. The Journal noted that, Stephen Breyer was reimbursed for trips some 219 times over the last 14 years of his time on the court, and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Sotomayor both amended their financial disclosures after reimbursements were discovered that hadn't been disclosed. And again, no one is alleging anything nefarious there with respect to those justices. But of course, the entire D.C. press corps is making all sorts of insinuations without foundation against Alito and Thomas. But for all 9 justices to come together and issue that repudiation of Dick Durbin, I thought was interesting.
Yeah, well, Ruth Ginsburg had her husband worked for a law firm that had business before the court, who that law firm may have had clients who appeared before the court. Nobody questioned it. Nobody made a big deal about it. Again, the key term here is bad faith. This is a completely bad faith move by Democrats who are furious that Mitch McConnell stopped the confirmation hearings for Merrick Garland, who are furious at Ruth Ginsburg for not resigning earlier in her career and allowing that seat to be filled by Donald Trump. So by a nominee of Donald Trump, I should say.
Right.
And so they're just angry. These are angry, bitter Democrat senators who are furious that they couldn't stop Brett Kavanaugh from getting on the court, who are furious that they couldn't stop Amy Coney Barrett from getting on the court. And having lost that fight, they're not giving up. They're inciting people to protest outside justices' homes, something that's unthinkable and unheard of. Mm-hmm. They are
and potentially illegal.
And potentially illegal, depending whether it certainly violates the statute. Some people question whether the statute is constitutional, but it clearly violates a statute that's on the books to try to intimidate a judge by a Supreme Court judge by protesting outside the justice's home. So this is a charade. This is the sort of charade they pulled at the Kavanaugh hearings. They're talking about now reopening the investigation of Kavanaugh.
Oh, okay. I know. I heard that.
Nope.
That's whatever happened to Christine Blasey Ford? And did anybody pay her to get up there and make up those lies? I mean, that was so bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know, but we certainly know the one piece of evidence we have is that she said several people were at the event where Brett Kavanaugh supposedly assaulted her in high school, and all of those people say they have no memory of that, okay? Yeah, I mean, it was a charade, but the Senate has a role. It has a constitutional right to confirm or not confirm a nominee. They lost that fight, but they're not giving it up. This is because they are furious that there is an institution left in this country. All the rest have been gutted by the left. There's one institution that hasn't been, and so they're going to take it down.
Maybe we can pin the leak on Kavanaugh's buddy from high school, Squee.
Oh, that's
right. Maybe he's the leaker. So what about Gorsuch, though, on a serious note? What about Gorsuch saying, essentially, I have a pretty good idea who the leaker is? Well, that sort of prompts me to say, well, is somebody going to ask Justice Roberts why we can't seem to get to the bottom of this if other justices on the court have a pretty good idea who the leaker is?
Yeah, I think that was Alito who said that. And,
it was Alito, yeah, right.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand not wanting to name somebody when you're unsure, but if that is somebody who is going to come up for bar admission or something like that, employers have a duty to inform bar officials as to any conduct they believe may reflect poorly on the ethics of the person. And while you may not have enough proof to name them publicly, I think, the Supreme Court would have an obligation to inform a bar ethics committee reviewing a candidate as to whether there is evidence, maybe not overwhelming evidence, to suggest that this person was involved in a leak. So, that's something that I think we should know. We should know who this person is. I mean, this person could be a future Supreme Court nominee. I think we need to know who this person is, and I think it's very curious that the court is so reluctant to go any place on that.
Before we let you go, I wanted to update and allow you to update everybody on a case that we talked about previous time you were on the show through the Legal Insurrection Foundation you started. Missouri State, this business boot camp that excluded white males, and where that case stands.
Yeah, so we brought a complaint to the Missouri Attorney General about a Missouri State University business boot camp that excluded white males. Only white males were excluded from it. We got some press attention for that, and Missouri State announced that they're not going to do it again. We don't think that
we did nothing wrong, and we won't do it again, right?
And that's right. We did nothing wrong, and we won't do it again. We promise. But it's not the first time they've done it. There was a loan program a year or two ago where they did something similar. So we are calling on the Attorney General of Missouri to conduct an investigation of Missouri State to find out how is it that a major state university even has such a thing. Nobody raised a question about it. What is it about the DEI programming and the other programming at Missouri State that even allows something like this to happen, not once, but at least twice? And so we think the Missouri Attorney General, who has ultimate authority to enforce the anti-discrimination laws, needs to conduct an investigation to find out how much else of this is going on. We just found out about this from a tip from somebody, but there may be many other programs that are going on. And so that's what we're calling for. We're calling for the Missouri Attorney General to conduct an investigation of this sort of DEI programming at Missouri State University.
He is Professor William Jacobson, clinical professor of law and director of the Securities Law Clinic at Cornell, founder of LegalInsurrection.com, an indispensable blog, and the president of Legal Insurrection Foundation that is doing indispensable work, like he was just describing, in the direction of Missouri State University. Professor Jacobson, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
My brother-in-law died suddenly, and now my sister and her kids have to sell their home. That's why I told my husband we could not put off getting life insurance any longer. An agent